It's another Seattle Kraken game day, and good thing, because we want to let go of what happened on Saturday. But we're going to start the show with asking, what's good with Joey Daccord? All that and more on today's episode of Locked On Kraken. All that and more on today's episode of Locked On Kraken.
You are Locked On Kraken, your daily podcast on the Seattle Kraken, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We are the Seattle Kraken.
Happy Black History Month theme night, Seattle Kraken hockey fans. Welcome to another episode of Locked On Kraken, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where we bring you your favorite team every single day. I am your host, Erica L. Ayala. I am also the founder of Black Rosie Media, a media company looking to empower Black women and melanated creators in sports media. So yes, happy Black History Month. I hope y'all have been celebrating all month, but especially proud of the themed night tonight for the Seattle Kraken. And I mentioned this a few episodes ago, but the logo that you'll see tonight prominently featured is actually a logo that is inspired by the Colored Hockey League. And if you want to learn more about the Colored Hockey League, check out an article on the Seattle Kraken website called The Original Sixes, written by yours truly. Actually wrote that before the Seattle Kraken was the Seattle Kraken. And it gives you a little bit of history of the Colored Hockey League of the Maritimes in Canada. So go check that out. Today's episode of Locked On Kraken brought to you by our friends at Sleeper. Download the Sleeper app and use promo code LOCKEDONNHL to get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. So see Sleeper's terms of use for more details. In the open, I teased a little bit here that I wanted to talk about Joey Daccord. And that's because the numbers were just glaring. And if you are an everydayer and an OGer, then you know I've been questioning right around the All-Star break whether we were running into a situation where we are running Joey Daccord into the ground. And that might have come. I want you to hear a little bit later in the episode from Jordan Eberle. He felt that the team didn't play terribly, but you had a situation where you were playing a team in the wild card hunt with you. You were about 3 points within reach of the wild card hunt, but then you slide to sixth in the Pacific Division alone after the loss to the Minnesota Wild, which again, I'll talk about in a little bit. But in the wild card, everyone was able to leapfrog the Seattle Kraken. So now also sixth in the wild card, Calgary in front of us now, Minnesota in front of us, St. Louis, Nashville, and the Kings. And so the one thing that stood out to me was Joey Daccord, but maybe not in the way that you think. That being said, I do want to show you just the numbers, because we saw Joey Daccord. This game for the Seattle Kraken was out of reach early in the second period. And so if you look at the numbers alone, I mean, look at these numbers. A .692 save percentage, 9 of 13 for Joey Daccord. But look at this also. 4 of 6 even strength, 5 of 7 on the power play. These numbers on top are Philip Grubauer's numbers. 14 of 15 even strength, 3 of 3 on the power play. A .944 save percentage. But to me, the name of the game and the real tough break was special teams. Look at this. 0 for 5 for the Seattle Kraken on the power play. And we gave up 6 power play opportunities, and the Wild capitalized on 2 of those. To me, these numbers are just really, they stand out, not in a great way. They do not stand out in a great way. And you know what? Joey Daccord seemed a step behind to me. So maybe that is some fatigue, whether it's mental or physical, maybe even emotional. I'm not one to speculate. I'm just saying those are all options. But to me, he looked fatigued. He looked a step behind, and that's not usually the Joey Dax that we see. So something's going on there. Something's got to get figured out. I know that on the broadcast, and I mentioned this on the podcast the other day, Eddie Olczyk was like, oh, we'll probably see Philip Grubauer against the Minnesota Wild. I told you on Saturday's YouTube only episode, which actually posted on audio earlier today, that no, I think we go with Joey, but Joey looked gassed. He looked out of it, and he didn't look sharp, and we needed him to be sharp against the Minnesota Wild. Philip Grubauer gave up an early goal when he got tapped in, but after that, I showed you the numbers. He was pretty great. But I want you to hear what Dave Hakstol said, and I agree with what he's about to say regarding instinct versus action. Here is head coach of the Seattle Kraken. This is Dave Hakstol talking after the loss to the Minnesota Wild.
To be honest with you, I had that instinct one goal earlier. Joey's been really good for us. He's fought hard. He's battled. Tonight wasn't his night, and this is not on him. But he, just like everybody else, is going to have to address his own performance, shake it off, and be ready to go for the next one.
So, I like what Dave is saying here. And for those who maybe missed it, Dave opened his post-game remarks. Well, he was asked a question about, feeling frustrated. And he said, or maybe I forget if that wasn't maybe the word. I'll let you know exactly what he said. Here's what Dave said to open his remarks.
I don't think we should be frustrated. I think we should be pretty upset with ourselves. I mean, I talked about it standing right here a couple nights ago. There's moments in the game that are game-changing moments that 2 nights ago we met every one of those moments. Tonight we didn't meet very many of them, right from the number of penalties we took, especially the stick penalties. Penalties that put us down 5-on-3 and give the other team free opportunities. And, a team that has been 30+% on the power play over the last dozen games. Down to other things, and that's me included, head of the line. No, I'm not frustrated. I think we should be pretty upset with ourselves.
Saying they should be pretty upset, and I didn't even get the wording right. That's why I was like, let me go back. You don't often hear Dave talk like that, but I think he's absolutely right. We're gonna hear from Jordan Eberle a little bit later in the show, and I alluded to it that he said, "Well, I don't think we played bad." There's playing poorly, as in you just don't have it. You don't have the skill. You don't have the speed. And then there's playing in a disappointing manner because you know that you are capable of more. And I think that's where the upset word comes from Dave. I think that's where the disappointing word comes from me. This was a team, and I talked about it on Saturday's episode. The Seattle Kraken have this nagging issue of, for whatever reason, not playing always. I mean, I'd have to run the numbers, but I will say this. It feels like too many times the Seattle Kraken have a chance to play a team which is in their catchment area, like we're gnawing and clawing for place in the standing as against a particular team, aka the Minnesota Wild, and we fumble the bag. That's upsetting. That's disappointing. That can't happen when you are saying that you are making a playoff push in earnest. You're going to lose games. Other teams are going to outperform you from time to time. But when another team outperforms you and you don't do what's within your capability to do, you heard Dave talk about the stick penalties. I mean, everything started off so promising. Vince Dunn with the quickest goal in franchise history, I believe, 36 seconds into the game. It's like he heard me talking about him. But then we give up a goal to Johansson at the 4:59 mark. We give up a power play goal to Kirill Kaprizov at 13:32, coming right into the second period. At the 1:09 mark of the second period, Boldy gets the third goal. Kaprizov gets another one, and it's right around here. Kaprizov got the fourth goal. The fourth goal for the Minnesota Wild came at the 2:14 mark of the second period. Of the second period. And it's after that Kaprizov goal that you just heard Dave saying that's when he had the instinct. He had it after the Boldy goal on the power play that maybe it was time to make a change, left Joey Daccord in. And I tell you what, other than the power play goals, I mean, first of all, the one power play goal where the Wild were just playing catch below the goal line, and then we're able to wrap around and just had Joey Daccord going post to post. That's why the 5-on-3 was disappointing and upsetting. Because if you don't have a 5-on-3 situation there, then you can afford to have one of your defenders break that up. But Minnesota played that perfectly. You can't even be mad at them per se, but you have to be mad again that you put yourself in a situation to be on a 5-on-3 where people can literally just play games behind your goaltender and you can do nothing about it, presumably. I mean, again, that's a tough goal to put on Joey Daccord. That being said, there were other goals where I just feel like his edge wasn't there. His vision wasn't there. It wasn't necessarily his vision. It seemed like he was kind of moving in slow motion, like he was stuck in quicksand, a step, a hair behind. And we're so used to him being energetic. So it was noticeable. I don't know. What do you think? That was what I saw. That's my eye test. Coming up on Locked On Kraken, let's get into tonight's game against the big bad Boston Bruins, but they are struggling as of late. So this could be an opportunity for the Seattle Kraken. That being said, we have to seize it. Let's get into that and more coming up on Locked On Kraken. Today's episode of Locked On Kraken brought to you by our new friends, and that's Camino Consulting. Now, you've heard me talk about Camino Consulting before. Our sponsor, once again, is Camino Consulting. You've heard of the online family course that Camino Consulting has been offering, and that Locked On listeners get 25% off, a 25% discount through the end of February. But what about live seminars? In both sports and business, the challenge in differentiating candidates and recruits is an endless battle. Everyone can demonstrate their qualities and qualifications, but we all know it's the intangibles that matter when those things are all equal. So contact Camino Consulting for their team and management seminars to get a peek behind the curtain and watch your next recruiting class or hiring group become one of the most effective you've ever seen, because you've already identified the right candidates. You've already learned how to communicate and motivate them in accordance with their own preferences. These are all things that Camino Consulting can help out with. And if you aren't in business management or working with a team, there are referrals. Make some money while making your workplace and teams better. Every group works better together. So contact Camino Consulting at caminoconsulting.ca and get on the fast track to understanding. We'll be right back with Locked On Kraken. Thanks as always for making Locked On Kraken a part of your daily destination. Erica L. Ayala here. Talked about Joey Daccord in that Minnesota game. I want to really look ahead to Boston because we had some success against Boston recently, and Boston has struggled recently. So we played them, and we were their third loss in a row. Then they played LA and they went to overtime, a loss. They get 2 wins against Dallas and Edmonton, but then lose in overtime against Calgary and then lose in overtime again against Vancouver, their most recent loss. In their last 10 games, they are 3-3-4. In our last 10, we are 4-4-2. So both teams coming off a loss. The Bruins haven't won in 2 games. And so I've mentioned this before when we played Boston. Knowing that they're fatigued, likely, overtime losses, road losses, this is an opportunity for the Seattle Kraken to get back on track. That being said, you can't rest on the fact that you beat Boston just recently. You can't rest on the fact that you're playing at home. You have to put in the work. You can take nothing for granted. And I do think there are some things that the Seattle Kraken is doing to ensure just that. But first, I want to go back to the conversation regarding Joey Daccord. Dave Hakstol was asked about it again today. If I had to guess, we're going to see Philip Grubauer in net. I think that makes a lot of sense on multiple fronts. I didn't mention this, but if you're an everyday or an OGer, I didn't mention this in the first segment, but if you're an everyday or an OGer, I told you coming out of the All-Star break that we had to have a short, quote unquote, leash, just for lack of a better term. But the runway, I prefer to use that. The runway was going to be small. Dave told us the runway was going to be small when it came to 1 or 2 losses in a row. But I think also I've been saying that within game, you have to be able to make adjustments. And so, although it was frustrating, I was glad to see that Dave removed Joey, tried to wake up the team. He even made some in-game changes, and I'm going to talk about that with the forward lines. So just keep that in mind. I do think we're going to see Philip Grubauer, but don't be surprised if you see some changes made. I don't know. I hope we don't need any changes in net for any reason. That being said, just keep an eye out on whether it's in goal or with the forwards in particular, because this is the time of year where we really got to hunker down. But let's just talk a little bit more about Joey Daccord, or let's hear Dave talk a little bit more about Joey Daccord. These were his comments for more after morning skate.
You mean you gather information on all parts of the game as you move forward, and I said that after the game. That's how I felt, and if I go back and look at it, I feel the same way right now. It's based off of factual information that you see and that you take in, and every once in a while there's instinct there that obviously finishes those decisions.
So we have some more clips that we're going to hear from Dave, but also from Jordan Eberle. And Jordan Eberle disagreed with how I would classify the game, and maybe even what Dave said. Coach Hack said it was an upsetting game, and that the team should be upset with their performance. Eberle had a little bit of a different take, and I think it's interesting. I don't know that either one of them is wrong or right. The language I've been using is a little bit more in line with what Dave is saying, but I think Eberle had some really great things that he was saying as well, in particular when it came to what I just said in the first segment. He was asked, is this a Seattle Kraken team that kind of plays up or down depending on their opponent? So let's go back to this clip here and hear from Jordan Eberle at morning skate.
I mean, obviously we weren't proud of what happened the other night. The standings, you come to that game, it's a pretty large one. And I don't think we were bad by any means. I mean, they scored 2 power play goals. They get one at the end of our power play, and then they get one 4-4, and then before you know it, the game's out of touch. So, we have to find a way. I think we got a little off track with the reffing or whatever it may be, and we just got a little undisciplined, and they took advantage like a good, solid team they are. So, we have to get back to, before that we had strung together 4 pretty good nights and got points in all of them. And we just got to get back to that hockey. I think you look at this time of the year, mistakes and lack of concentration like that cannot happen because, you find yourselves on the short end. I mean, we want to try and be in these situations as long as we can. I mean, obviously the pressure and the importance of each game goes up, but that, for me at least, it makes the game exciting. It elevates hopefully guys' play and guys' sense of urgency, guys' sense of desperation to get into obviously the playoffs. That's not the case. I mean, I like to think that in the NHL there's no easy game. Every team, doesn't matter if you're playing last place or first place, it's tough to get 2 points in this league. So obviously we've had some success against some top teams, and obviously the Detroits we lose to Minnesota, but those are both, in my mind, playoff teams right now. So we just got to find a sense of urgency and a sense of, for me, a little bit more consistency. We seem to have games, like you said, where we've played really well, and then games, and even night to night, we've had periods where we've been good and periods where we haven't been good. So just a more level of consistency and in my mind, urgency and desperation, and that should come with just looking at the standings and seeing how many games are left.
So there goes Eberle. I like what he's saying, that the urgency has to come from looking at the standings. I walked through the standings earlier on the episode, and saying, hey, I hope it's not the case that we play differently against different teams. He says he likes the pressure of looking at the standings, knowing that it's crunch time. The prompt was, a lot of players are approaching this time of the season as if it's a playoff run. Is that how you approach it? And what about that excites you, or something to that effect? And I agree with what Eberle's saying here. You got to go after it. I also heard the amazing Megan Rapinoe. I spent a lot of time ahead of her retirement ceremony game at Lumen Field in Seattle, because the Seattle Kraken were in a preseason. And one thing that she told me is that, a lot of people were asking her, oh, well, do you think your teammates are wanting to make a strong push? And they did get to the final, by the way, and then she tore her ACL. Gosh, anyway, that's not the point of the story. The point of the story is that a lot of people were saying, oh, my teammates are playing, or her teammates are playing for her. Teammates saying, of course, we want an extra push for Megan Rapinoe, but also for Lou and Jess. And Megan was like, yeah, I can understand that. That being said, if every day, if every season, if every game, that's not your motivation, then you might need to question why you're still playing. And I thought that was great. So I agree with what Ebbs is saying, but it shouldn't take just this time. It shouldn't take a wild card chase for the Seattle Kraken to get motivated. And that's a little bit of the reason why we're in this situation to begin with. Put aside the injuries. I know we had a crazy amount of injuries. It affected the lineups, which we'll talk about in the final segment. That being said, there were chances for the Seattle Kraken to lock things in and to play on day one like they were in a playoff hunt. And I don't know that everyone showed up. It didn't feel that way. It didn't feel like everyone was thinking in that way. And that's a mentality that you grow over time. And so that edge is missing. It's felt all season like that edge has been missing from the Seattle Kraken. And now's the time. Like Eberle said, now's the time to ramp it up. So if I'm wrong, prove me wrong, Seattle Kraken. If I'm misunderstanding kind of your laissez-faire, lethargic, at times I've called it, play, definitely inconsistent. It's definitely been inconsistent. Prove me wrong. Now's your chance. And we're going to talk about what Dave Hakstol and the coaching staff is doing to ignite or maybe reignite the Seattle Kraken team coming up on today's episode. Today's episode of Locked On Kraken also brought to you by our friends Sleeper, who I mentioned at the top of the show. It is beyond the halfway point of the season, Seattle hockey fans. We've been through a lot. We still have a lot to go. And now is the time to make the push. But regardless of where the Seattle Kraken are in the current standings, I want to remind you that you could win big playing daily fantasy hockey on Sleeper, the official daily fantasy app of Locked On NHL. Sleeper is our number one choice for daily fantasy sports and especially daily fantasy hockey because with Sleeper, you can win up to 100 times your cash in daily fantasy hockey contests. And you can also play NFL, NBA, MLB, college football on Sleeper. But of course, you can find the NHL. And entries can be made in under a minute, which is great. You get in, you get out, and then you watch the game. All you have to do is pick whether studs like Burakovsky or Tolvanen or Bjorkstrand will record more or less than their sleeper projections for things like goals, assists, saves, plus, minus, and more in any given game. And to 100x your bet on Sleeper, all you need to do is correctly predict the outcome of 8 player stats. You heard me right, Kraken fans. You can win 100 times your money playing daily fantasy hockey with Sleeper. So start paying attention and nail your picks so you can start winning big. And to get started, use promo code LOCKEDONNHL to get a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. That's code LOCKEDONNHL. See Sleeper's terms of use for details and locational availability. All right, Kraken fans, if you do want to check out any of our sponsors, a good way to get prepared is to know the projected lines. And I'm going off of, I was not at morning skate, but thankfully some of our friends, Emerald City Hockey, Sound of Hockey, were there. And I'm sure other people tweeted this out, but I personally saw Sound of Hockey, so I want to give them credit, likely Darren Brown. But this is what we're seeing. And in a minute, I'm going to play you a clip describing the thought process here. But at the top, and this line in the projected lines that we get closer to game time has been back and forth, whether it's line 1, line 2, I don't know that it matters. But okay, the lines are McCann, Beniers, Eberle, Schwartz, Wenberg, Bjorkstrand, Tolvanen, Gord, Burakovsky, Tomasz Tatar, Yamamoto, and Tanev. Again, that's how everyone lined up when it came to morning skate, assuming that we're not going to get many changes on the defensive side. So you've got Dunn with Larson, Alexiak with Borgen, and it will be Dumoulin with Schultz, expecting Philip Grubauer, and that's what we're expecting. But I want to take you once again to Dave Hakstol and talking about why he switched up those lines and what he's been seeing from André Burakovsky. You know, I like to give Berkey a hard time, and he has not scored for us yet. But Dave, with a little bit of insight, why he's moving Burakovsky around to try and get his engine running, or maybe just to get him set up. And I want to break down what I've been seeing from Berkey, but let's first hear from Dave.
Well, you know, we created timely offense. You know, we're going to have to be better tonight in terms of getting out of our own zone. You know, Boston turned a lot of pucks over on us, and we get some real good saves from our goaltender that allowed us to get into a good spot in that hockey game. So, reality, we got to be cleaner. We got to be quicker with the puck. We're going to have to be more efficient in getting out of our zone, which gets us through the neutral zone, and that's where we want to play against these guys. We're getting some good play out of Berkey right now. The puck's not going in the net, but we want his level of play to continue. And reality is, between Gordy and Wenny's line, at 5-on-5, there hasn't been a lot of offensive production in terms of goals scored. So just a way to tweak that. Those guys are playing hard, generating some opportunities, but in an attempt to generate a little bit more. That's just it's a little tweak that puts both of those lines into positions with people that they have played with before. Ollie with Wenny and Schwartzy, and Berkey with Gordy's line. So just looking to spark a little bit more offense.
So I'm of a few different minds. On the one hand, I I do like what our third line has been doing. I've been saying that all season. And Dave is right. We need to get goals. I've been saying it. We need offense. And it just hasn't been happening. I do still think that Gord line gives us so much energy. They just work so hard for us, trying to win the puck back, fatiguing, frustrating the other team. And it hasn't translated into goals for that line. But right now, it's also not translating into goals for anyone else. So maybe you take some of that, piss and vinegar, as our guy Ryan Donato used to say. Maybe you take some of that sandpaper and you redistribute it. What I will say, especially in this game against the Minnesota Wild, André Burakovsky is skating much better. The guy comes back from injury 3 times, and I think he's finally starting to find his stride. And I thought there were times in the Minnesota game where he tried to do too much, where he could have passed the puck and maybe even just as a quick outlet to then recycle himself and get back into a position where he could receive the puck. Instead of doing that, he's doing it all on his own and taking a shot that's not a high danger shot. That's what I started to see. But again, this game was pretty much out of hand, considering that we weren't garnishing any offense in the first 3 minutes of the second period. So I understand why one might want to kind of take over. I just don't think it's the right move right now. So if I had to guess, I'm obviously not in the locker room today. I am in Tulsa, and we've got a Kansas City Mavericks game coming up. I'll get into that a little bit later this week. I'm not in the locker room. I couldn't ask Dave about this, but my eye test tells me Berkey was trying to force things and that he was frustrated. He wasn't the only one. But there was a time where I forget if it was a penalty. It was an icing. And on the broadcast, they're talking about how Burakovsky shooting that out of frustration. I don't think that, listen, I can't be critical of that behavior because I feel like I've disclosed this a few times. As an athlete, I was pretty intense. So I understand that. I've done that and worse. So I don't want to judge it. I will just say that I like what Dave is doing. To me, seeing the frustration from Burakovsky, seeing him kind of trying to play hero hockey, and then seeing Dave in game make the changes and continue to do so with the lineup. I don't like lineup changes. I really don't like lineup changes at this point in the season, but it's not working. And frustration is starting to set in. And you heard Dave say that he likes what Burakovsky's been doing. Allison Lucan broke down that Burakovsky 5-on-5 has been generating a lot of great things. But we're getting close. I think the instinct, Dave has talked to us about instinct in the last 2 days that we've had him on camera on the show. I played those clips for you on purpose because I get the sense from how Dave is talking that his instinct is saying that he's got to find a way to get Burakovsky in a position where he can score a goal before it just boils over. The frustration of being in a tight situation, the frustration of knowing that he's supposed to be our go-to guy offensively, and he hasn't been that. The frustration of knowing that Burakovsky has had to come back from injury 3 times. All of that, whether it's conscious or not, has to be. It could easily be in Berkey's head. It could easily be in his head. I'm not saying that it is. I'm just saying that if someone told me that it is, I wouldn't be surprised. It's a lot. So how do we set up Berkey to be in a better offensive place? Because getting Berkey in a better offensive place gets the Kraken in a better offensive place, and that's what we need. Just some things to think about. Fam. This is going to be a good one. I'm going to go over these stats or show them to you really quickly, but you can see that the records here, very different. The records here, very different. 81 points for the Bruins, 59 points for the Kraken. That didn't stop us from beating them, in our last outing. So, You play the game. Our home record 12-10-5. Away, the Bruins are 16-5-8, but they've struggled as of late. Again, in their last 10 games, 3-3-4. The power play, 22.8% for the Brew Crew and 20.9%. I think that's more of a baseball thing, but I'm going to go with it. You know, I'm talking about the Bruins. I'm also a baseball gal. So sometimes, anyway, the point is 20.9% for the Seattle Kraken. 79% clip on the penalty kill. We got to be better on the PK and not give away a 5-on-3 in front of who I'm assuming is going to be Philip Grubauer. Penalty kill is pretty solid for the Boston Bruins at 81.5%. So one of our everydayers, one of our members of the Locked On Kraken Insiders has been messaging on YouTube and in our insiders community, which I know I owe you some texts. I apologize for that. He has been saying that, ground zero. This homestand is the start of we have to wipe the slate clean and really get good here as we get closer to March and that trade deadline. So we won one in that period. We lost one. Now it's a matter of what we're going to do against this Bruins team. McCann, Eberle, we've been hearing from, they're just like, let go of what happened. Have kind of that goldfish memory mentality. Let it go. You learn the lessons, and that's why you do practice. That's why you have a focused morning skate. But you have to let the emotions of what happened the other night go. And it got emotional in a bad way. Now, see, the Kraken, I said I could get with the hockey fights against Vancouver, and then they jumped the shark against the Minnesota Wild. You go right back, you revert. And some of that was the Wild instigating because they, had a gripe. I don't know. I just think hockey fights are stupid. I really do. Hockey fights and storming the court, as far as I'm concerned, can go. But you know what? We're going to go because you've got to get ready for tonight's game day. Congrats to those who have scored tickets and will be at Climate Pledge Arena. Make sure you say loud and proud, let's go Kraken. But you also know, be kind to yourselves, be kind to one another, hold fast and stay true because we're still in this hunt, but we need a little more sandpaper. We need some more sandpaper. I don't know. I might have to come up with something cool. If you take sandpaper to a Kraken game, I will give you obviously a shout out on the podcast, but I'll figure it out. We got to do something, but I'm going to go to Home Depot, get some sandpaper and get ready for tonight's game. I will catch you on the next episode of Locked On Kraken. Peace out, everybody.